we got a crew here, 20 of us or so. Usually you have people trickle in. I think today's agenda is medium-sized. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's light. Usually we find ourselves going like 2 hours, but let's give ourselves a goal of like an hour today. Let's see how that goes. But let me do the welcome that Andrew always does here. I don't know what number we're on. Maybe this is Loot Town Square number 15, 16, 17. I'm not sure. I feel like I've spent a lifetime with y'all so far. But for everybody here, welcome. This is the weekly Loot Town Square. Today should be exciting. We've got a couple things that actually just launched in the past 24 hours and a couple things that are launching in the next couple days here. If you're new to this, and actually I do see some new faces today. If you're new to this, what this is here is a few things. It's a show and tell for loot builders. It's a launch pad for new loot ideas, a place to get feedback. This has become somewhat of an all hands for the loot community and really an asynchronous all hands. So the people who are in the session today, this is an open flowing, open mic dialogue, but also tons of people watch this afterwards. So post this on YouTube, put it on Apple Podcasts, post it on Twitter. You can find it in the Notion doc as well. I think in total we got a couple hundred to watch each of these things. So it's a really cool testament to just what does asynchronous work look like? What does asynchronous collaboration look like? Global, across time zones, across pseudos. An asynchronous all hands, let's call it that. And it also sometimes turns into a bit of an all hands for the wider hyperverse. Meaning that if you're on here today and you don't have a loot project to share, but you've got something else that's sort of permissionless, composable, on-chain and new that you're either working on, that you're excited about, that you want to get feedback on, this is also a safe space to get feedback on just sort of wider hyperverse projects that people are banging on. There's a huge movement happening here, and this movement, in a lot of ways, and for a lot of us, began with loot back in, September. And it's a movement towards composable, open, permissionless, asynchronous, new ways of collaborating around the world. I know I personally have been so nerd sniped by the writing and content and lore and decentralized world building opportunities that Loot creates. But Loot is something for everyone. Loot is a game. Loot is a platform for art. Loot is a fan community. Loot is a platform for media, for stories. Loot is a technology primitive for other utility products built on top of it. And so really this is a diverse group of people, developers and builders and designers and writers, gamers, nerds, fantasy nerds like myself, and a diverse group of projects. So every week here is just, you never know what you're gonna get. We do have an agenda, but we can obviously diverge from this agenda. But today's agenda, we're gonna talk about the Open Quill Foundation and the launch of the Genesis Scrolls project, which is the first round one of this open writing grants program. We're gonna have Glasialiak talk about his work, music work, and lore work. We're gonna have the Noob talk about super cool trait bags, and I'll let him present there. Pretty exciting. We're gonna have, I'm forgetting the name here, but somebody present the Helms project. I wanna say Michael, maybe? I forget. I always have trouble trying names to projects, but we're gonna have the Helms project present, which was launched last week. And then we can also talk about the Crypt, which just launched about an hour ago. And I don't know if I see the Crypt team on here too, but maybe somebody can ping them in their channel. And then banners, I don't know if you guys have anything you want to update on the Painter story that launched or more. And then other folks across the board. Again, open mic, pop in, give feedback. But we are all happy to be here, and thanks for joining this morning. Before we do dive in, anybody want to unmute and just sort of give State of the Union thoughts about what you're thinking about these days, where your energy is, what Loot means to you right now, et cetera, before we dive into specific projects?
I'm excited about the Open Quill program. I think it'll be really fun to see all the stories people come up from that.
Yeah,
Yes,
me too.
I second that.
Who is that?
Me.
Glasialiak, nice.
Yeah.
Sorry that I had to mute you, Triggity and Easy Ronin, but if you guys want to get unmuted, go to General. Yeah, glad you guys are excited about the Open Quill program. So am I. It's really a dream come true to be able to work on fictional collaborative world building from the minute Loot launched. That was the way that it sort of sunk into my mind, is that this is this primitive for storytelling and primitive for world building and collaborative fiction, collaborative decentralized fiction. And so the Open Quill program is going to be a first exciting step towards that. Maybe I should just jump in and start talking about that then. Let me open it up and share a screen. All right. Screen share. Cool, that looks like it's working. If you want to dive into this too, the link is in announcements. I think 2 or 3 announcements up. But TLDR here is that we just launched a program where the goal is to create and publish a physical, real Lootverse compendium of short stories. I don't ever really go on video, but I can paint a picture of where I am right now. I'm inside the library of my house, and behind me, it's just full of sci-fi books and fantasy books and all sorts of other fiction, Kurt Vonnegut and Borges and more. And I have just always been a fiction nerd, and really specifically a sci-fantasy nerd, sci-fi and fantasy and kind of everything in between, fantastic stories that allow you to kind of step out of your brain and step into a parallel universe, step into a parallel character, parallel situations, allow you to really discover something maybe about yourself that you would never discover in real life, but through a book, through fiction, you can kind of explore not only somebody else's creation and world, but really explore your own mind and explore what would I feel like in this situation? What would I be like? What would it mean to me to be in a situation like this? And something about fantasy, even though sometimes fantasy feels like young adult or kid stuff, a lot of fantasy is dark and a lot of fantasy is real and raw, and obviously sci-fi too. Can span the gamut of everything from like 6-year-olds excited about sci-fi to somebody at the end of their life excited about sci-fi and everything in between. There's something really special to me about that, and I just feel like it's a perfect metaphor for the power of fiction, and the perfect metaphor for the power of story. And sci-fantasy, fantastic stories are really, again, the perfect metaphor for the power of lore as the connective tissue of humanity. So that's a pretty meta, macro way of thinking about this. But I wanted to preview that because this has been so important to me, really my whole life, but really important to me for the past 6-7 months of Loot. My dream here has been to weave together this infinitely expansive, decentralized, permissionless, but still cohesive universe. And it can be a cohesive universe with parallel takes and parallel characters, and not every story obviously needs to interoperate with each other, and not every game needs to compose with each other. But to me, a Lootverse filled with random stories of katanas and swords and divine robes that have nothing to do with each other, that have no shared physics or no shared common principles or no shared timeline or no shared characters. We kind of already have that. That's just Google. I mean, you could just go to Google and type in story about katana, and there's tens of thousands of stories that might use the word katana, and that's cool. But what's exciting to me is the idea of building a cohesive universe where there are canonical facts, and there are canonical principles, and there are foundational physics, and there are sort of core foundational things that tie us together and make us one universe. And hell, maybe it's a multiverse of a few universes that you can step in through portals, I don't know. But it's not just sort of random sand scattered in the wind. It's one cohesive community, one cohesive universe of games, of movies, of books, of stories, of characters, of art, of lore, and everything in between. So with that really high-level backdrop, I've been working quietly, probably for the past, 3 months on this, with a group of us: Banners, Loot Hero, J Numbers, Cameron, Conway. Sorry if I'm forgetting to name drop you here, but a group of us have been working on this project which is a public goods project for the Lootverse. And it's a open writing program funded by the DAOs, the projects, and the individuals across the Lootverse who believe in this collective vision of a cohesive yet infinitely expansive Lootverse. And funded by people who say, hey, gaming has crossed over to Web3, finance has crossed over to Web3, art has obviously crossed over, but where's writing? Like, writing hasn't yet really crossed over. There've been like bits and pieces, but writing really hasn't. And it's funded by a group of people who said, hey, let's build a bridge. And let's build a magical bridge that reaches out to the world of Web 0 writers, Web 1 writers, Web 2 writers, whatever you want to call it, and also our own community of Web 3 writers, and says, let's build a bridge that shows people firsthand the power and magic of collaborative world building, of decentralized creation, and of like direct to fan creation, where all of a sudden the fans aren't just walking to a bookstore and buying a book and paying for it and then never talking to the writer, but that the fans are the creators and the creators are the fans, and it's all intermixed together. And instead of a world being owned by HBO or by Disney or by Sony or Paramount, which is fine too, but in parallel to that, in parallel to a world that Netflix builds, what if we built our own world? And what if we built a world that we collectively design and steer and nudge and prod and own together? And that's a big vision, and I do think Loot can live up to that vision. This is a first step towards that vision. And this first step says, with no strings attached, other than just please write CCO, public domain content, no strings attached, we are giving writing grants to lore-driven projects, starting with Loot. And in this case, starting with what we're calling, as a working title, the Genesis Scrolls. The Genesis Scrolls being early snippets, early stories, here I'll pull up some examples of what I had in mind. Early things like a diary from an adventurer, maybe the history of a realm, a field journal discovered in a cave, a book of poems with handwritten notes in it, letters sent between adventurers, and obviously just like any short story anyone can imagine. The idea here is we as a community, both people here who are on this call and in this wide Lootverse community, but also the community at large, the wider sort of sci-fantasy geek community of Web3, and even farther, just the global sci-fantasy nerd community is huge. There's millions, if not tens of millions of us. I mean, out of the 7 billion people in the world, maybe there's hundreds of millions of us being people who are so moved by and excited by the power of fantasy fiction and the power of sci-fi to experience the future, the power of fantasy to experience alternative realities. And I believe that Loot can be that watering hole, that connects you, that center of gravity that brings us all together to create a infinitely expansive fantasy world. And what's so powerful about Loot is that truly nobody owns it. Dom obviously launched it and gifted it to the public domain of the internet, but truly nobody owns it. And we'll have leadership batons that ebb and flow. We'll have games that rise. We'll have stories that rise. We'll have projects that rise over the course of whatever, the next decade even. I do believe that Loot can be a foundation for infinite creativity, and that it can be the beginning of something great. And so if Loot itself is the beginning of something great, hopefully this project specifically, this Open Quill Foundation Genesis Scrolls writing project, can be a gift to adventurers on that journey. Again, it is full public domain, public good for the Lootverse. This Genesis Scrolls Open Quill Foundation, at least at this moment, doesn't have any plans to like launch NFTs or launch a collection or make money off of it. It's really just writing grants that will be retroactively funded, that will happen in rounds, and we can talk about some rounds, maybe people have some ideas, that are all about helping bring the Lootverse to life. And Lootverse, not just Loot, but the whole Lootverse. Bring to life the realms, bring to life the crypt, which is happening right now, bring to life crypts and caverns, bring to life Hyperloot, loot explorers, Genesis loot, Genesis adventurers, banners, fill in the blank, really sort of bring to life the entirety of this universe. And not every story needs to be like the story of a loot bag. These are just stories from our universe that fit the physics, that fit the narrative, that fit the kind of foundational meta timeline that we're all coalescing around. And our goal here is to really launch a book and launch the first compendium of short stories that hopefully, the physical book obviously is a little bit silly, but I'm in a physical library with other physical books on the shelf here, and I would love, I'm looking at my big Dune tome on the wall here, on the shelf here, I would love to put a Lootverse compendium of short stories. Maybe it's called the Genesis Scrolls, maybe we come up with a better title down the road. I would love to put that book right on the shelf, right in between Dune and, what do I have here? A Wise Man's Fear. Or maybe Patrick Rothfuss will launch that fourth book at some point, and I can put that right next to it too. I know that's a sore subject for fantasy geeks like me. So I'm just so excited about this, and obviously you can tell in my voice that I feel like it's important and powerful in just a moment. And what I would say to the Lootverse is everybody is welcome. You don't need to be a capital W writer to participate in this. You just need to be a nerd. And you just need to have a story you want to tell, big or small, a character you want to sketch out with, or flesh out with words, a moment, the story of a realm, like I said. And these don't need to be stories about each NFT. I think that's a really big difference in what we're trying to accomplish here. This is not just a wiki page with the list of the NFTs and then snippets about each of them. The goal here are stories that traverse across the Lootverse. So a story set in a realm about the Divine City, about a Genesis adventurer who sees visions of the future, about a crypt where she hides her bag, about a special 3D ring that she gifts to her daughter, something that cuts across the whole Lootverse. And the goal, some of this will be amazing, some of this will be a little more campy, some of this will be fun, some of this will be serious. Who knows where this goes? But I'm hoping that people are excited about this like I am. And the call to action here is either dive into openquill.foundation, and you can sort of bounce around and make sense of what this is, and you can understand the shape of the Lootverse through this. And then really dive into the project, starting in the Loot Discord and then beyond. We don't need to get into all the details of this right now, but we're trying to keep it as simple and clean as possible. And most of these buttons will just take you to the Loot Discord, to this section of the Loot Discord. I'll just zoom in so you can see it. I've got lots of Discords going on here. But it should take you to the Open Quill program section of the Discord. Maybe we can move this up, but here it is for now. It's got some notes about what it is, read-only channel. It's got a learn channel that takes you through the Loot Foundation physics and timeline and more. And Loot Hero was prescient enough to decide to make a quiz. So now there's this really cool Lootverse quiz that you can bounce through. And it's just simple and fun and kind of funny at moments too, where for a newbie or even for experts, it's kind of like a reminder of the canon and a reminder of some of the facts and just some of the sort of core components of the Lootverse. And so you'll bounce through some of this. You don't have to, but it's, I think, helpful to all be on the same page. And then right now there's an open channel that's just a channel that's like, call it a writer's room. Maybe I should even change the name of this to writer's room. Actually, I think we probably should. Writer's room's a good name for this. So this is a writer's room channel for anybody who wants to participate. Just dive in and share and ask questions and share notes and share sketches and share drafts. And then we'll have updates along the way. The goal is that this content will live in Loot Talk. So in Loot Talk, which is our official forum, there's a writing tag, and everybody's submissions can be posted to Loot Talk. But that's more of a staging area. The place that we really want this to live is in the Lootverse Atlas. The place that we really want this to long-term live is mapped to the sort of physical map of the Lootverse. I'm sure everybody on the call has seen this before, so I don't need to spend too much time. But this is really exciting. I see Lord of a Few is on the call here, dialing in from Amsterdam, I think. And so you could also speak to this if you want. But we don't have a lore module yet, but we will soon. And what's going to happen with the lore module is that for every NFT, every bag, every GA, every crypt, and more, each of those NFTs will have the ability to let you kind of write lore that touches them, that mentions them, that tags them, and there'll be a whole lore section that all the content that gets published to here can also be cross-published and almost featured up to the Atlas. And maybe over time, the Loot Talk becomes like a feedback forum, and then when it's ready to be like formally published, we can formally publish it on chain into the Lootverse Atlas, tied to the bags, tied to the realms, tied to the crypts, tied to the wonders, etc. I haven't seen any other NFT project in the world do this. I've seen a lot of NFT projects do like a book of lore where you have all the NFTs, and then the owners of the NFTs can write sketches of those NFTs. What we're hoping for here are stories that traverse across the entirety of the tens of thousands of NFTs of the Lootverse. When you add together loot bags and Genesis adventures and banners and realms and crypts and more and more and more, there's a rich fabric of characters and places and items and history and more to tie all together into the fabric for a story, or the foundation for a story. So when this all comes back together, let me end on this note, when this all is sort of said and done for round one, what we're going to end up having is a set of stories. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000, depends on how creative we all are. But it's a set of stories that will be written on chain and manifested through this Lootverse Atlas across all of our NFTs, and then collected up into this compendium and collected up into a real physical short story compendium that you could put an ISBN number on. We can publish it on Amazon if we want to. I doubt we're going to go and like get a publisher for it and make it a quote real book, but the world is so open these days that it's not that hard to publish like true real content, especially with the power and energy and the fan community we have around this. Maybe this does become one of the first public domain compendiums of short stories, and surely would be the first public domain compendium of short stories from Web3. So this is an adventure within an adventure. There's a lot of learning along the way. There's a lot of unknowns still. There's a lot of open questions as to how do you do something so crazy like this? But we're going to try it. So I've been talking for like 20 minutes about this. I think I'll stop now. But hopefully y'all are inspired as I am about this. And why don't we use this moment here? We're going to talk about, there is a whole agenda. We've got, who else is coming up? So we've got, like I said, Glacialiac, super cool Helms, and maybe a crypt conversation coming up. But maybe give me like 5 minutes or so of just feedback, thoughts, or even just like FAQ type questions. If anybody has questions of like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but like something's not clicking for me, I would love to get feedback and questions even on the fly right now. Or just plus ones and positivity, or hey, I want to raise my hand and write, whatever you guys want.
Yeah, one thought that I think will be helpful. I know this is coming for round 2 and 3. But I think it'll be also really cool once you have the kind of compendium of these original short stories to start bringing in kind of like other media projects so that they can kind of like compose the short stories and bring them to life, possibly for like the next rounds of the lore writing.
Yeah,
because I think
1,000,000% agreed. Yeah, obviously
they're like
music
top of the
and
funnel,
art.
yeah, top of the funnel stuff to bring people deep into lore. So, yeah.
That's really cool. You could treat it almost like these stories are going to be composable, and not composable in the way that we usually use the word composable, and that like they'll be on chain, but they're not going to be like every single word is composable. Like I think the story itself is more like composable by a human who can read it and say, okay, I want to make art out of that, or I want to make a character sketch out of that, or I want to write more, inspired by that. And you're totally right that once these stories are manifested into the Lootverse Atlas and on Loot Talk and into a book, it's going to be a fair game because they will be CC0 for anybody to come in and say, hey, I made the music for that story, or hey, I'm making art, or I'm making a video, or I'm going to extend that story with some GPT-3 or something. Where this goes is, again, infinitely expansive, but ideally still cohesive in that if these are all coming from the lootverse physics and the lootverse facts and all the the gifts that Dom has given us in the structure of the contract, manifested into stories and then leveled up into rich multimedia, to me that feels like a beautiful metaphor for the power of sort of infinitely expansive yet still cohesive media. So yeah, Glacialiac, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I was just gonna say it's super exciting, and you mentioned that the book might not be as exciting, but that is maybe my and plus this, but the book, the idea of a physical object is really interesting to me.
Yeah, me too. Maybe I'm old school. I'm actually funny. Usually I read on a Kindle, but when I love a book, I'll buy it so I can give it to other people.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
sending a link to a friend to buy a book is kind of annoying, but handing a physical book to a friend is pretty powerful. So yeah, if we get to this point of publishing this as a compendium of 30, 40, 50 short stories, long, short, fiction and nonfiction, and we can put it on our shelf as a book, I will be incredibly excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds amazing. Just a quick question about composability and the on-chainness. So, have you guys thought about creating a standard for linking the stories or linking the characters or linking X, so that when multiple stories are created, it's composable from like day one?
Yeah, the place that's probably going to happen the best is on the Lootverse Atlas, but Loot Hero or Treppers or actually looks like Lord of a Few hopped off. If anybody else wants to speak about it, there's definitely some ideas. The simple version though will be on the Atlas. Each of the stories will be able to tag the NFTs that it touches. So if somebody writes a story that touches GA number 1 and Loot Bag number 50 and Realms number 10 and 1005, those will be tagged. So at least you'll have like a canonical library of all the stories that have ever touched each of these NFTs, and then vice versa, each story, all the NFTs that it touches are kind of like a web that way. But in terms of facts or characters or feelings, or like this character has a specific name, or this character has a specific moment, that was a life-defining moment for them, I haven't really thought about, or I've thought about, but I haven't figured out how you would make that itself composable. I don't know if Loot Hero or Treppers, anybody wants to speak to that.
Super
I
exciting.
don't know if this is the right space for a brainstorm, but that would be a really fun brainstorm to have.
Yeah, I second that.
Emery, if you want to have that conversation, we could even make a dev channel in here. Maybe I'll do that later. And we can have a dev conversation about some of the composability stuff that you just called out. Sweet. But yeah, if you're asking that question, then you are grokking what the spirit is here for sure. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up my chunk here in this announcement. But I'll wrap it up with two things. One is if you are excited about this, dive in, obviously. Two, though, is if you know somebody who might be excited about this, if you know someone who's a writer, an aspiring writer, who's in a writing program, who's a fantasy nerd, and maybe doesn't even get Web3 yet, but could get this, tag them, or share this, or do whatever you want to do. But you can just tag them on Twitter too. I've seen some people start to tag their friends who are writers here. So this Twitter chain might be a good place to do that. Send them this link, openquill.foundation. I think the reaction from some people will be like, dude, this feels too good to be true. What are you talking about? You're giving out free money and free grants and free loot NFTs just because people are going to write stories? And the answer is yeah. That's probably one of those suspend disbelief. Web3 is still in its crazy infancy moment. But yes, from the Genesis Project, from Divine DAO, from Realms, from Banners, Crypts and Caverns, and hopefully from Loot itself, these are no strings attached donations, and actually from individuals too. There's a really exciting thread from Zoink, who's the CEO of Figma and a Lootverse nerd like us, talking about his experience in his early career getting opportunities that look like this. And so he ended up actually making his own donation to this program, which is pretty exciting. I haven't yet made a proposal to the Loot DAO, mostly because like Loot doesn't really have a DAO and we don't have much in terms of coordinated action, at least with respect to the treasury. But Loot does have a significant treasury that's got 200 bags and all the connected A gold and 200 ETH or something like that in it. And so I do intend to make a proposal to the Loot DAO itself. Genesis Project donated 20 ETH. Divine DAO is going to be donating to this. I'm going to make a proposal to Realms and Bibliotheca to donate to this because I think it's also going to help bring Lootverse Atlas to life. And I think it'd be totally fair and definitely aligned with everyone's goals for Loot itself to support this program. Just a pure public good to help bring the Lootverse to life. So one call to action is tag your friends with the writers, join if you're a writer. But number two is when we do make this proposal, help us get to the quorum and help just amplify it and high five it and go vote on it. Cool. Thank you guys for indulging me in all that. Hopefully you're not sick of my voice.
Hey Tim Schull, it's Kodiak here from Banners. One thing too is, we put out the, I think you mentioned to Cajun at the top of the call about the painter. Feel free, as you guys are tagging other writers, to tag the painter, because I think it's a pretty good example of some of the things that you've done here that have incorporated, realms, mounts, and a few other things. It's, Cajun and I are not, admittedly not developers, right? And we've been able to really take the bull by the horns and put something out there that, we're quite proud of and we're getting some really good feedback on. So I think it perhaps is a good example of it as well.
For sure. I mean, I'm thinking of the painter as the first submission to the Open Quill Foundation or the Genesis Scrolls project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me find the link here and send it to everybody.
Appreciate it.
Here, boom. I'm also going to cross-post that into Writer's Room too.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you guys are sick of my voice. Let's pass off to Glossioliac. From my voice to Glossioliac's laugh.
Sweet. Okay, sharing the screen. Okay, can you see the Google Slides or Sheets or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. Yeah, hi, I'm Glossioliac. I'm a writer and musician, and lately I've kind of think of myself as a primitive builder, I guess, designer, because I don't code LOL. Yeah, last week I was showing some music and talking about music in the Lootverse. And today I'm kind of showing a small part of a character, but I thought it'd be interesting to kind of talk about character in the Lootverse and in the Hyperverse, because I think it's a kind of a very different playing field. So yeah, I'm going to talk about like two kind of like major eras, or I guess portions of eras in our culture's mythology. The first one being the one that we're currently living in, what I'd call the theater of celebrity, and then the new one that is slowly coming to being the Hyperverse. So yeah, it's pretty cliche to say this at this point, but in modernity, we kind of have moved, in the last 100 odd years or so from having a kind of culture that's surrounded on, what a modern person would now call like metaphorically real mythologies, right? Of gods and goddesses and, religious idols of worship, to this kind of like very strange and new world that has seemed to like replace this, that being celebrity, something that we kind of think of as literally real. So yeah, it's again pretty it's just a trope at this point. We kind of replace Mother Mary with Marilyn. Yeah, but it functions very much like a theater. It's a kind of like top-down process. And in the era of like the social media celebrity, it's kind of, omnipresent. It's like absolutely everywhere, right? Everyone is their own kind of little talking head with this name and face, with this kind of audience, however big or small. And it's this like kind of big theater of a bunch of people cosplaying as this idea of themselves. Yeah, and it functions a lot like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, kind of weirdly, right? Just as we get a thrill of the, Daredevil showing up in the Spider-Man movie, there's kind of a thrill that you get, or people that like this shit get from Pete Davidson showing up in the Kim Kardashian story. But it has not kind of been without its limitations. I mean, in order to kind of like make it as an artist or develop any kind of like large following, you kind of have to enter the arena and make this little kind of brand of yourself. And kind of what happens in that experience is that, all stuff you try and make or anything you try and do to kind of like exit this little straitjacket of your avatar, it all gets kind of traced back to you. You can't really separate art and artist. And I mean, I literally like have talked to so many artists and creatives or whatever that are passionate and brilliant artists, but they just feel absolutely stuck because they don't want to do this whole theater of celebrity thing. But it does really seem to be changing. If I had kind of told you like 5 years ago that a bunch of celebrities would be changing their kind of most valuable piece of digital real estate to a stupid picture of a monkey to signal their belonging to this very strange, different kind of mythology, you'd say I'm kind of crazy. And there's just kind of tons and tons and tons of trends that seem to be pointing towards this. So, I mean, these are kind of some kind of like larger ideas about this like major shift. But the one that will, that I think is like most prevalent and obvious is the idea that we're moving from the epicenter of art making being that of like the celebrity artist, singing this song of their self in their personal life or whatever, to this thing of like the community artist. So, yeah. And what's also really interesting about this shift towards the hyperverse is that we are kind of moving away from these, mythologies of, something that we'd say is literally real back to some kind of like these metaphorical worlds. I can tell you that it's been extremely liberating to be able to kind of like participate in the early stages of that. So yeah, then when we start to consider like how does kind of character play in this like old world of the theater celebrity towards this like kind of new world where the community artist is swallowing the celebrity artist, this is where it gets like really, really interesting. So I'll take like two canonical examples from each of these eras. The first being the Kanye West song. I think my favorite character in maybe in art history. I think he's as interesting as like Hamlet. To the Dom Hoffman primitive. And then we can kind of think about how character plays in each of these works. So like the Kanye West song is, again, when you listen to that song, you're not really kind of entirely experiencing the sound waves that are vibrating from your speakers. You're listening to this guy sing that song, and it's actually like the character of this human being that actually leads to all of like the kind of interest and like compression in the story of that song. So the celebrity artists, their personal life is so center stage that you cannot really separate the work from the artist whatsoever. But something really weird is kind of happening in the hyperverse, which is like totally different, right? You know, whereas the mythological well of meaning that we draw from with the Kanye West song is Kanye the person. The primitives kind of have almost nothing to do with the, you know, who the artist is dating. In fact, where we kind of actually draw, like, you know, like what is real, right? The well of meaning is what's on chain. In fact, the artist is only kind of important insofar as they have like a reputation, you know, so you'll kind of like follow the things that they make. And this is where it starts to get really strange and interesting. So yeah, right now I'm gonna share like a little part of a song that has like a character attached to it, and then we can kind of start to see how this kind of changes the playing field for making, you know, living, breathing, and characters with like a real feeling of agency. So yeah, I mean, what I'll do right now is I'm gonna just outline the part. I think this is kind of actually an important process when making work in the hyperverse. You want to be able to kind of like draw a little outline around this part that you've made so that it's very, very clear how people can like pick it up and use it. So let me outline the part. And this is something that would be great to do on chain. Who is the singer? The singer is called Old Howler. They are this kind of like being that has just been kind of like wandering the realms, singing this song of lamentation for thousands of years. I have 3 lost verses that I've kind of put out in this song, but there are 3 verses, but there are 5 lost verses. And those have to be kind of resurrected and written by other people. I actually kind of want to experiment with auctioning work to lords so that they can kind of like get a little network effect of lore in their realm. So the where is to be determined. And then when the Genesis era. So yeah, now I have this little character, and this is where you can do really crazy shit with it. I mean, you could imagine, you know, some artist making an album for some kind of character in the mythology of the hyperverse, and then saying at the end of the album, this character's soul was split into 14 pieces to be resurrected in 14 different, you know, emergent art mythologies of like the future. So all of a sudden you see one musician take up the kind of cosplay of that character and resurrect it in Chain Runners, and another one shows up in Crypto Coven, and then 12 other works that don't even exist yet. And all of a sudden you've kind of created this thing that is like, sounds like buzzword bingo, but it's something like composable identity or some kind of like decentralized celebrity. So I think that is like a really rich design space that what I have here is very tiny. I think it's literally just scratching the tip of this massive iceberg. So yeah, this is going to be a field that I'm going to be working in for a long time. I'm really interested in, you know, redefining the artist in the era of the hyperverse. So yeah, that's kind of basically the gist. And then I just go give some like little shout outs. A big shout out to The Painter. I'm really excited. They used some of my music in the trailer for that, which is really, really fun. A big shout out to Loop Hero for kind of putting together this, and Fabian for making this amazing art for some of the other music I put out this week. Some, you know, Genesis era, Genesis project theme music. And then, for the kind of portals and passages project, I put together some portal sounds, which, you know, may or may not be used in the future, but they're kind of really fun imagining sounds of the loopverse. So I'll kind of link to all that in the chat. And I'll kind of start auctioning in the future some work off to lords, because I think that's an interesting business model to experiment for us lore writers. And then I'm working on some open flow lore. I'm open to commissions. And then after that, I'm going to be building my kind of hopefully flagship project, which is a kind of sound primitive project called the Loot Oracle. So, okay, that's it. I hope it didn't take too long. Thank you. Yes.
Amazing.
Thanks.
It wouldn't be a Loot Town Square without a Kanye West reference and a Glossioliac laugh. Thanks for sharing that. That's really, really cool. You're still screen sharing, by the way. Sweet. Okay, who do we have, or actually any feedback or comments? Either in general chat, we can read them out loud, or just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll just say I really like what Colossialiac is doing. The sounds he put out for the Genesis project, combined with that AI artwork that Fabian helped generate. Just looking at those two things overlaid, like just listening to music and looking at that imagery, just really made the whole experience of distilling Genesis Mana and then summing Genesis Adventures. It just made the whole thing feel a lot more real, and starts to make me realize that we're really not too far off from bringing this whole thing to life. And I think the Open Quill program is going to be a huge spark. And I mean, we're just putting a ton of, the loot ecosystem is really just investing a lot in that. And I think it's the right place to invest, because once I think a few of these stories take hold and build new scaffoldings for others to build on top of through music, visual arts, etc., I think this is going to come to life quite quickly. And I'm very excited to see that. So thank you for your part in that. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name.
Colossialiac. Yeah, I might be due for a name change. We'll see.
It is a little bit of a tough one, but thank you for your contributions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that when you get like a few artists firing off, Luke's going to have another explosion moment. So it's going to be exciting to see that happen.
Agreed.
Right on. Okay, next up, we've got... Where's my agenda?
I think it might be us.
That's you. Yeah, super cool. Danube. Take it away.
Cool. All right. So we have our team here. Bruno and I are going to be chatting. So this morning we just launched Trait Bags. Trait Bags are on-chain, they're like on-chain lore about the adventures of Loot. It's an on-chain character creator where you can go in and define the background, powers, and abilities of your character. And I think they also really factor in probably as really interesting story seeds. And we have tied in a few relationships to a couple realms locations in there as well. So I think it's also this very interesting thing of sort of giving people the ability to create on-chain lore about their characters in a way that is sort of constrained by this character creator to reference other points in the Loot universe. So I think I'll pass it over to Bruno. We had a demo that we recorded for last week. We'll just play that demo, and then I have a couple little things at the end.
Awesome. I'll just play the demo.
Yeah, and please, if there's any problems with the video, just chime in and tell us, and we can switch back to like a live presentation.
Hi, this is Supercool. So Supercool is an engine for cross-game interoperable NFTs and collaborative storytelling. We focus on three things. 1, no-code NFT creation engine. 2, collaborative on-chain storytelling. And 3, interoperability across Web3 games. So today I want to focus on number 2, which is collaborative on-chain storytelling. So Supercool's lore creation toolkit has 2 parts. One is trait bags, and the other is free-form lore. So a trait bag is an on-chain collection of user-generated traits that goes beyond only loot items. You can create adventures, monsters, and more, and traits can include beliefs, troubles, personality, enemies, and other categories that give depth to the elements of fictional worlds. And then with trait bags, you can expand on stories using our lore creation platform. On to the demo.
We have our trait bag UI opened up here. So you can see that we are creating a warrior. On the right, we have the different categories of what you can create. Right now, we just have the warrior category loaded in, but very soon, for launch, we're going to also add the hunter and the mage categories. So you could mint an adventurer as either a warrior, a hunter, or a mage. Below, we have different trait types. We've bucketed traits into types, so that you can see the related traits together here for selecting them. We have convictions, which are what does your character believe in? Troubles, which I think is self-explanatory. Characteristics describe the characteristics, obviously, of your creation.
You can select some information and traits about their foes. We have the advantages, which are their powers and abilities. Artifacts, which are the gear and artifacts that they carry with them. You can also say, what is their purpose? What is their origin? Where did they come from? And what relationships do they have with other characters in the Loot universe? Let's check out what traits we've already added to our warrior. The first one is a conviction. If you're going through hell, keep going. Secondly, we have trouble. You are technically still on the run from the law. Our warrior has acquired a taste for strong drink, and they are a quarrelsome war god with a reputation for starting fights. In the rain and shadow, you can see my eyes glowing. They are on the run from the world's most powerful magician. And they are a master of blind fighting and no stranger to pain. So let's add a couple words to finish up our trait bag. Let's come in here. I don't think we have a purpose yet. That they are honor bound to avenge my brother. And let's also add a relationship in here. Our warrior is a devoted servant of the great dragon tyrant. So after I've selected my 10 traits, I can go ahead and mint my trait back. And then I can look at the trait bag that I just printed. So here we have the trait bag that I just printed. It's all on-chain, so all of the traits are on-chain, and what you see here, the token URI, is SVG that's rendered on-chain through Solidity. So when you create your character, everything gets stored on the blockchain and is rendered through the blockchain without any storage elsewhere.
So after creating trait bags, we can attach it to any NFT in the Loot ecosystem. So here we have Hyperloot 1542. So we can click here to create a super cool stuff NFT, which represents the digital DNA of a character, which determines two things. One, how it behaves, and two, how it looks like. So let's go ahead and make stuff. Now we can create the lore.
On this lore page for our character, we decided to name them Elf, and you can see some of the traits, well, all of the traits that describe this character. And you can also attach freeform lore and stories about your character here. So based on these traits, let's just take a look at a sample of the kind of lore that we can come up with from these traits. Wolf had seen too much. His eyes burned as if a fire raged inside his head and only escaped through his eye sockets. He had made the mistake of crossing a great desert, and that desert killed his brother, Wolf's own sight, and replaced it with eternal hellfire that lit up his mind, even when he slept, even each time he died. Wolf sought to rewind time to bring back his brother if he could, or to at least join him in death and leave this walking damnation. The dragon tyrant promised it. If Wolf could bring the tyrant the head of the Prince of Ghost, dragon's call the prince kept guard over. Hopefully this was the last royalty that Wolf had on that. So we just came up with this based on the traits in our trait bag. We've been thinking about traits as being not only how your character behaves, but the story seed for that character. So each trait is very evocative of a backstory. Why is this character like this? And you can either write up your own lore and stories, or you can collaborate with others to workshop it together and come up with a story for your character, and then attach it to your super cool stuff NFT. We mentioned this before, but a super cool stuff NFT is a combination of two things. The trait bag, which describes what your super cool stuff can do, and the art, which shows at its core what does it look like. So this art could be pixel art that you've drawn with the super cool pixel art drawing tool that you have, or it could be the art of the NFT that you attach to your stuff. Once you've combined these two things together, you end up with an NFT that is interoperable and can be used across games. So you can take your super cool stuff, play with it in a card game, or in an animated 2D side-scrolling platform, or even upgrade it into a 3D NFT that
So the first generation of trade bags is launching very soon, generation 0. So to learn more about Supercool, you can go to supercool.xyz. To know when trade bags are going to launch, tune into our Twitter. And if you want to help define the next generation of trade bags, join our Discord.
Yeah, so we
should probably stop it here, Bruno, because this part's outdated. Because we launched. So, so we launched this morning, basically at the start of the town hall. I think it's actually pretty fortunate timing, or just very coincidental timing, that the Open Quill project launched this week, and there's been all this stuff about the Atlas, the Realms Atlas. So I do want to double click on a couple things that I think are really cool about trait bags. The first thing is it lets you attach sort of these story prompts and these little seeds of a story to your character. These are the convictions, beliefs, who are their foes, who are their friends. And I think that is a very inspiring thing to go off of for telling stories about the characters you make. That's when I've played through the UI, I've sort of like, as I'm clicking around, it just starts putting stories into my head. The second thing is, because we've defined these traits in this character creator, we can actually encode relationships to other things in the Loot universe. This sets up scaffolding for the characters that you make. So we can include their origins as cities that exist in the Loot realms, or possibly like a dungeon that a monster came from, or a monster that they slayed that existed in a dungeon, or relationships that they have to other characters in the Loot universe. And the other thing that you might maybe heard at the end is, so this is Generation 0. We're going to launch a Generation 1 later after Generation 0 closes. Generation 0 is open until next Friday, so not tomorrow, but the Friday after. After that, we're launching Generation 1. And for Generation 1, we're not planning to write any of the traits ourselves. We have a system, and we've actually talked with a few people in the Loot community so far, to have Loot community members define those traits. And when Loot community members define traits, if those traits get used in a Generation 1 trait bag, that Loot community member earns from the minting of that trait bag. So if anyone is interested in adding in some traits, some story seeds, some connections to other things in the Loot universe to be included in Generation 1 for trait bags, we'd love to chat. Yeah, and then I'd also just love to try to explore later, or well, I guess pretty soon actually, if there's some way that we can have these trait bags contribute to the Open Quill project, either as story prompts, or it could be some other manner. But yeah, we're excited to launch these, and we'd love to hear feedback either now, or if you go and mint through our UI or check out the site, we'd love to hear feedback about that. So, Bruno, was there anything else to add?
I think you said most of the things. I think one interesting thing is that trait bags can also serve as a mechanism to ensure cohesiveness of the loop in the loopverse, and so that could be an interesting thing to explore. That's it.
And one other thing that I just want to add, the attaching trait bags to NFTs, it's not live yet, but we're working on that right now. We're going to have some version of that out, I think today, and then progressively just improve that process of being able to attach your trait bag to an NFT in the Loot universe. So thanks for listening. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. The attaching the trait bag thing, how does that work? Like, explain it like to an idiot non-dev.
Okay, sure. So we're doing it, I think, in progressive decentralization. We're progressively making it more and more on-chain. So the first thing that we're doing is basically you can just reference another NFT and just and then we store that reference in our database, and then you can come to the page and you can see, oh, this trait bag's for this NFT. And then very soon we want to make it so that what you'll be able to do is take a trait bag and then for any NFT that you own inside the Loot ecosystem, and I think we'll actually let you attach them just to anything. If you want to attach it to a chain runner, might not make sense, but go for it. But then we would store that reference on chain actually. So it could say this trait bag is attached to this contract address and this token ID within that contract address. And then we're really interested, I think this came up before with some of the linking of, it came up in the context of realms, but in how you can link together a bunch of different art and stories and content about your NFT or like create kind of like hyperlinks between them. We haven't fully figured that out, but that's something that we are really interested in exploring and possibly talking to others that are working on that problem. So that's super high level, but like first step is we're doing it centralized database, and then we're going to just add like permissionless kind of like on chain. If you own it, you can link it on chain. I don't know if that gives a good answer to your
that's
question.
amazing. Yeah, totally. And I just also wanted to say, I love this project so much. I've been was writing some traits with Swami and stuff, and I can't tell you how fun it was of like a lore writing project. I really felt that feeling of the game is making the game, and that was really exciting. And also the fact that it kind of like lowers the barrier of entry for people to like be artists and creators in the Lootverse. And I think that products like that, projects like that, there will be like a huge demand for them in the future. It's empowering like the folk artist innate in every person. So I'm just really inspired by this. So
yeah, thanks so much. Yeah. Glossal Aliak is one of our Generation 1 trait authors got an early preview and he's written some awesome traits, which, well, I don't know. We'll share them when we launch Gen 1.
And just a plug of the other stuff you guys do. The Pixelies are so much fun. It seems like a simple medium, but going in there and playing with it and drawing stuff in the Lootverse is really quite a bit of fun.
Yeah, it's banners. We've sort of been ping-ponging back and forth off each other, making people are drawing some banners. And there's actually, in the pixel art editor, there's banners templates. So whenever you draw a banner, the banners project gets a portion of those mint fees. And so there's been some cool pixel art that's started coming through from that. If there's no more questions, we have an Outpost channel here, so you can hop into our Outpost channel and ask us anything. We also have our own Discord server, and I'll drop links in the general chat. And as I said, trait bags are live, so if you want to go mint a trait bag, I'll share the link. And I'd love to hear, any feedback about that minting experience and the traits and all of that. So we just love collaboratively building with the Loot community. Thank you.
So cool. Thank you for sharing. I know you've been working really hard and long on this, so this is probably a really exciting day for you guys too. There's a outpost too, so feel free to go wild in that outpost and tag people and share highlights and share cool examples of use cases. On our agenda, I see Helms project, but I don't see Michael on here. Is there anybody else from the Helms group on here?
I think one of them commented in one of the chats and said their internet's bad and they can't make it. Marcel said that.
Okay. Well, I'll do a shout out for Helms. I'll just post in the outpost here. I think I can do a tag. Helms is live. I'm not going to do justice to explaining their vision and plans, though. But yeah, check it out, helmsproject.com, and we'll probably hear from them live on the next session. The other exciting news of the day is that the Crypt is live, Crypt Chapter 3, and the first dungeon just fell. Loot Hero, do you want to grab the mic and tell us the story of raiding some crypts today?
Yeah, sure. So, for those of you not familiar with the crypts, the chapter 1 was for OG loot only. And so the dungeons are randomly generated with 8 different obstacles that line up to the 8 items within the loot bag. And they use the item rankings that are encoded in the loot contract, along with the item classes, to kind of match up obstacles or monsters with the loot items in a really cool and fun way. And so chapter 1 was 16 dungeons, and you could use loot bags only. And then chapter 2 was 16 dungeons again, each of them a different order based on the contracts, and the same orders that are present in the Genesis project. But the second chapter was M-loot only. And so they kind of changed things a little bit to increase the damage and just kind of make it a little, like, the intention was to make it last longer. Chapter 2 is still running for some of the dungeons, but I think we surprised the crypt team with how quickly we took down the first crypt dungeon for chapter 2. I think doing so took like over 100 of us attacking with perfectly optimized M-loot bags, essentially. So it was a pretty heroic event on behalf of the loot community. That was really fun, but chapter 2 is still up. So if you go to the crypt.game, you'll see chapter 2's up, and if you have M-loot, you can raid right now. And then chapter 3 they launched this morning, and it features a number of new novel changes to the game. So the first being is that it's gas free. So they're doing some fancy stuff on their back end where all the transactions are being processed through Polygon. So you sign a transaction, which is gas free, just proving that you own the particular loot asset. And then everything's processed on Polygon, and then it publishes the results back to Ethereum, where you can then claim your relics. The other novel thing about chapter 3 is that it utilizes loot, M-loot, and Genesis loot or Genesis adventurers. And so it's a tiered dungeon design. So it starts out with obstacles that require OG loot, and only once those are defeated do the M-loot obstacles become available or unlocked. And it's not known what those obstacles are going to be until the loot obstacles are defeated. So you take down the loot obstacles, the M-loot ones appear. So if you have M-loot, you can then attack those. And then once the M-loot obstacles are defeated, then it opens up the final section of the dungeon, which is the 3 bosses, which require Genesis loot to raid. And so for the skills dungeon, which was the first dungeon that we raided, we were able to take down all 3 of those with coordinated attack that utilized loot, M-loot, and Genesis adventurers. And so right now, I think the Dungeon of Power is in the second stretch of, is in the M-loot phase. So if you have M-loot right now, you could choose to either attack a chapter 2 dungeon, or what's probably more productive for you would be to attack the Dungeon of Power in chapter 3. So that's where we are. It's really fun. The relics that are being distributed for chapter 3 are the premium relics. So if you go to their webpage, they have their NFT relics and how rare they are. And this particular chapter, they're doing their premium relics, which would be their skulls, their crowns, medals, and keys. So highly recommend. I'll post some links in the chat. If you have loot, M-loot, or Genesis adventurers, all 3 can participate in chapter 3. And furthermore, I believe it's also tied into the Rift. So if you use your loot bags, you'll earn experience to help level up your bags within the Rift. And just to finish that thread, and as a replug for Rift from last week, there's 3 prizes up for grabs within the Rift project. The first is 7 Genesis mana. The second is an OG loot bag, and the third is a Blitna. And the way that you claim those prizes is by earning adventure mana within the Rift Crystals game And so having a higher level or higher experience loot bag or M-Loot or Genesis loot bag, all three are supported by the Rift, allows you to mint higher level crystals, which produce higher amounts of adventure mana. So this whole thing kind of ties full circle, where you can use these loot assets to raid in dungeons or in relics, gain experience, level them up, earn more adventure mana, and then, yeah, there's those three prizes I mentioned. It's a fairly significant amount of adventure mana. Like right now, I don't think anybody's close to having enough to claim those prizes, but that's kind of the intention, is that it would take a while and or take collaboration amongst a number of adventurers to share adventure mana to claim those prizes. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview.
Cool. The bonus round for the Rift there. Thanks for sharing all that. We are an hour or so in, and we've covered a lot of our core stuff today. That was really exciting to see all that. Open mic. Anybody want to share anything you're working on? Feedback on what you've heard so far today? Plus ones, excitement, etc.
Sneak peek.
Yeah, go ahead, Standard.
All right, let me get my screen shared here. So cool seeing all the projects. Already forwarded the writing project to my writer friend.
Sweet.
And raided the dungeon. Okay, so I've been working on weapons. And just wanted to show a few of them. So this is a really basic one. It's the short sword. So, there's nothing really to it, and these are not enchanted or anything. They're just very basic, and I'm kind of proud of them all. It's very stylized. And one more thing. So the grimoire, or grimoire, how do you say grimoire in English?
I don't know, grimoire, something like that.
I think you said it right. You got it.
Yeah.
All right, so the grimoire is better seen in the dungeon because of the lighting. So let me go into the dungeon. All right, so here it is, and I made the basic attack for it. So it's got impact effects. And that's it for now. That's all I wanted to show.
It's super cool. Hey, I'm new to this. What exactly is that? What is your vision for that?
So this is a framework for building games and using the core engine. And I'm making a foundational layer of equipment and level generation, things like that.
So cool.
And so people can then build, experiences, or if you imagine like maybe perhaps one of the stories from Genesis that you want to build the level in full 3D, you could build that.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah, the editor is called Core.
If y'all are new here, standard combos are just one more thing presented. Just one more thing. Let me show you this 3D game engine I'm building. 3D character.
I come from the gameplay, right? I know a lot of people come from all kinds of different backgrounds. For me, it's from video games, from the interaction layer, right? So I want to bring that contribution to the loot community. It's what I'm good at.
Really cool. I believe that developers developed a good gaming engine. We can build 3D games that's more accessible and just more fun to play with.
Yeah, the accessibility is a really important point. This is one way to bring mainstream people into the loopers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is incredible.
just gonna call out some names here. Feel free to just ignore me. But Hill, I know there's some exciting stuff on A Gold if you want to chat about anything. Fisky, I know you were looking for an animator. Who else? Fabian, if you wanted to show off some of that Mid-Journey work. Oh my God. No pressure, but just mic's open if you guys want to.
Hey, I'd love to, but it's like bedtime for my toddler daughter here, and she's going crazy. So sorry about that. But some other time, maybe next time, that'll be great. I'll arrange with the rest of the family.
Cool.
Yeah, I probably got a small reminder from the Eagle side.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'll probably just do a very quick one. Full screen. Live. Can you see it? I assume you probably can. So,
yep.
So this is the Eagle staking website on Rinkeby testnet, and then I think I did a quick run through last time, but we have been live testing on Rinkeby for at least, I believe, 2 days now. So we got like 3 days left, and then this is just for community to test out the functionality. As you can see here, I got my address on Rinkeby. I got some testnet loot. By the way, I don't think your loot bags on main network, so probably head to Eagle Twitter. You can see the address for Rinkeby loot and Rinkeby more loot. So go there, mint your own bags on Rinkeby, and then when you come back to our website, you can select the loot bags or end loot bags you want to stake, and then you can just click stake, and you got the reward info here. And for now, the epoch is 1 hour, but when long-term mainnet is going to be a week. So you have to come back every epoch to click stake. So you do this on testnet once an hour, and then you accumulate some Eagle, and then eventually you can claim them. So we're appreciating feedbacks from community when it comes to testing this out, whether you find any bugs, when there's any deviation from the math expected. So it's like we hope to make sure this is doing it, the smart contract is correct and secure, and then if everything goes well, we should be able to launch it. So yeah, just a quick shout out and reminder for all of you who are interested to non-custodially stake your loot back on mainnet in the next few days or weeks, and depending on the progress, obviously. But definitely check this out and see what bugs you can find.
Nice. Anybody else want to share stuff you're working on? Or just thoughts, feedback, enthusiasm?
Hey, yeah, I just want to say that I recently joined the Discord, and I'm super happy by how nice everyone is and how welcoming people have been. So just big shout out to you all.
That's awesome to hear that. Thank you. The Loot Discord is funny. It's thousands, I think maybe even tens of thousands of people, though there must be some that are dormant accounts. Yet there's really so little like when moon will developers do something, because in this case there is no development team. We are the development team. I think people have really picked up that vibe. The Loot verse first couple weeks was crazy fun chaos, but the Loot verse past like 5-6 months has just been building together and just a real joy. So yeah, definitely something special going on here.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm bummed I missed that first chaotic part, but I'm glad that I got in now.
Okay, we're coming up on 1 hour and 10 here, which I think is probably a good time to call it. I've recorded with the Craig bot, which I think should work, but if somebody else did a recording that has a screen share, just hit me up in DMs or share it in the general chat, and we can edit it together and put it on the normal Notion. For other folks, if you want to present in the future, there's a channel at the top called Call Agendas. I'll tag it in general right now too, Call Agendas. For the past 6 months, Andrew and I have worked kind of quietly in the background every week to corral people together to present what feels like a spontaneous weekly all hands, but actually is usually pretty organized. We're trying something here. We're going to make it a little bit more autonomous to see if the community can self-organize a little bit more. Obviously happy to keep doing this stuff, and I love this and love all y'all. But if we can make this more autonomous from an organizational, administrative standpoint, that would be nice. So if you want to add yourself to that weekly agenda, that's an open, editable form. Anyone can edit it, so yeah, please be kind to the form. The past 2 weeks, I think we've done a pretty good job with this, and let's keep trying. So yeah, feel free to jump in there, add yourself. And again, it doesn't just have to be loot stuff. It's okay if you want to do show and tell at the end for wider Hyperverse things. And yeah, I think let's call it. Thank you guys for coming. And if you're listening later, asynchronously, go team.